Welcome back to What Makes You Tick. I'm Stephen Bradshaw, and the reason I created this podcast is to help you find inspiration from the stories and experiences of others. What Makes You Tick is a vehicle for people to share their life's knowledge, their passions, and experiences with you. I get energy and inspiration from talking to people, and my goal through this platform is to help you learn from others and use this knowledge to inform your lives. My guest today is an international rugby player, Ian McKinley, and Ian's journey is not straightforward. Like most of my guests, he too has had to face a number of challenges throughout his life. Ian speaks openly and honestly to me about a life-changing injury that shattered a boyhood dream to play for Ireland. However, he also shares some of his darkest moments and how he managed to fight through them to turn his life around. Through resilience and serious amount of determination, Ian found his way back onto the rugby pitch, but this time in Italy, where he managed to work his way back to the professional era and play international rugby. There is so much to take away from this conversation. Never give up, always push forward, and the bravest thing of all is asking for help. I know for one that my pride sometimes gets in my way when I need help the most, and it is something I work on regularly. Ian reminded me of how important it is to share your struggles with people that you love and trust, especially when those emotions overwhelm you. So check out part 1 of my conversation with Ian McKinley. Everybody, welcome to What Makes You Tick. On this episode, I have a guest who has trailed away in rugby for the last number of years, but not solely because of his talent, but also because of the challenges that he's faced along the way, which have helped him form a path that a lot of people wouldn't have thought possible. Ian McKinley is joining me today. Ian, welcome to What Makes You Tick. Thanks for jumping on board.
No worries, Brad. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
We were just reminiscing there a minute ago, and it's been a while since we've actually physically seen each other, but I'm staying up to date on all your latest media showcasing that we've been seeing while the internationals are being played. But it's good to see you on TV and looking very Italian, I might add.
Geez, well, that's probably an excessive use of hair gel, and yeah, I think my mates at this stage are going, "Would you ever get off that bloody television? It's just ridiculous." But
well, my dad
might as well play the Italian card while it's there.
He thought you were very articulate, so for a deaf man, that's a good
I'll
thing.
Take
it. Listen, as you know, with the podcast and What Makes You Tick, it's all about kind of learning about people's journeys, and I suppose the name of the show is What Makes You Tick, and obviously many people have different motivating factors and drives and goals in their lives. Before we get into your actual story and I suppose your journey to date within sport and within life, you've achieved so much on the rugby stage. Could you maybe describe to our listeners what indeed it is that makes you tick?
I think from a really young age, I remember vividly the 1995 Five Nations was sort of my first memory of rugby, and I was sitting there watching Ireland against England, and Ireland got pumped. But I just remember looking at this game and going, like, this is just, what is this thing? It's just fantastic. And I was lucky enough to have lived on an acre site with my family, so we had a fair bit of grass to kick a ball around, and just literally my childhood was running around in a garden, kicking a ball around by myself, because I'm the youngest of 4 kids and there's a bit of a gap between us. So I would just literally be there on my own, running out from the kitchen, which was like sort of the pretend tunnel, sing the national anthem. And the big dream was representing Ireland at home in Lansdowne Road, beating England was always sort of the big dream. So sort of, I think, what made me tick was just playing in front of people and, just putting your best foot forward and sort of showcasing your talent was sort of and of course the enjoyment factor, but just, I think, showing that you could be exceptional at something or be very good at something was something that really drove me. And as the story goes on, sort of some of those factors, I won't say changed, but they definitely developed, and they went off maybe in slightly different directions, but all for the good.
Yeah, it is interesting because there's a lot of kids out there that would have a dream to represent their country and represent or play the sport at a high level, and sometimes they don't get there. I think for you, there's a kind of an interesting journey, because in saying that you wanted to represent Ireland, you did it at a certain level, and then all of a sudden that was kind of taken away from you quite early. Maybe it would be good to talk to people about that, because that dream that you had to play against England at Lansdowne Road and represent Ireland is an interesting one, and you were on the cusp of doing that at senior level, but then things changed. It would be good to maybe just talk about this journey that you've been on, and because I suppose rugby, it offers people so much in terms of camaraderie and friendship and teamwork and honesty, and then it actually sets up a ton of challenges that very hard to foresee. Like, injuries are part of sport, but you had to retire at a very young age, 21, and you found a way back. So maybe let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think, we were fortunate enough to play together, Brad, and every player knows, no matter sort of what sport you do, whenever you're partaking, you're going to get injured, and all those qualities you talked about, camaraderie and discipline, friendship, all that sort of stuff. I was lucky enough to find that in Gaelic football as well. Growing up, I played that. Just because Sunday was the day to go into church, so there was no mini rugby. So the Gaelic was the substitute just for being able to play the games on Saturday. But no, as you mentioned, sort of the road to that dream of representing Ireland at senior level was. I mean, you never know, but it was certainly going in the right direction. I was fortunate enough when I left school to go straight into the Leinster Academy, and to be training with guys like Driscoll and Ethan Athewa, Sean O'Brien, Rocky Elsom, all these guys, just when Leinster were really starting to really hit their strides. It was just such a massive change from being in little old St. Columba's College that was, playing in third division schools rugby, so it was a massive change. And, fortunate enough, went up the ranks and represented Leinster under 20s. Then Leinster's first team after about 6-7 months leaving school, and then Irish under 20s in the under 20s World Cup in 2009. But yeah, as you said, injury is part and parcel of a sports person's life. And unfortunately, in January 2010, playing a club game for UCD, just my life certainly turned and changed dramatically. So I was just at the bottom of a ruck, and all I can remember, I remember it was top of the table clash against Lansdowne, and we'd actually been relegated the year before, but it was, a big crowd, the weather was good, and there were players like Stephen Keogh, Dev Toner, Dominic Ryan playing on the Lansdowne team. They're a fairly formidable team, and we had a good team as well. I think John Cooney was there and those sort of guys, and just literally went for one big rip on the ground, wrestling for possession, and just found myself on my back. And just unfortunately, my teammate was just rucking in the ruck and just was obviously a bit clumsy. And whatever way I was on my back, my head in maybe an incorrect position, and a piece of metal, his stud, just went into my eyeball and basically burst my eyeball. So I actually thought initially it was a deliberate act, because I heard my name being shouted a couple of seconds beforehand. And as well, Brad's, from playing second row, not like the soft position of out half where you wouldn't get your head in those rucks. Like, the difference between a stamping action and a rucking action, and this felt deliberate and straight down. So like, literally the whole pressure just went on the eye. So I lost vision completely. I remember I stood up and I just saw, the first person I saw was Dev Toner, because how could you not? He's 6'11", and I was so happy. I was really, irate, obviously, and in shock. So the physios ran on pretty quickly, and would have seen my eye not in the position it should have been. So they obviously realized it was pretty serious, and I was just taken to the side. An ambulance was called immediately, and went to St. Vincent's first, just to check if I had a fractured cheekbone. And I think that's when I knew it was pretty serious, because I was still, all of my kit, my UCD kit, had the jacket around me, accompanied by my brother, and who came with me in the ambulance. And people, in the A&E just were stopping what they were doing and just looking at me. So I knew it was pretty bad. And nothing, I'd no fracture in my cheekbone, but then was told to get your ass basically as quick as you can to the Royal Eye and Ear in Dublin. So my mum had arrived at this stage, and there was the three of us in the car, and I just said, I want to look at my eye, and my mum and brother pleaded with me not to. So I just, went ahead with it anyway. Just looked in the mirror, and my eye, was slightly out of its socket, and just looked like, I use the example of layers of cling film. It was just really cloudy, sort of. I don't know if you can see now, but my eye is really, really cloudy now. And it just didn't look like anything what an eye should be. So that was obviously pretty shocking. And,
What was going
worrying
through your
times,
mind at
because
that
then
time?
oh shit. Just, like just the unknown. And it's sort of, the situation just got worse, because you have the people in the A&E stopping what they're doing, looking at you, so you think you feel alienated. Then had the poor junior doctor who was on call at the A&E in the Royal Eye and Ear. Actually, it just went far and beyond than what she was qualified to do. So she obviously looked at my eye, and I was left in the room by myself for about 45 minutes without any information being given. So that was extremely lonely, and that was actually the time I sort of realized how serious it was. And I was actually quite scared, just because I was left in the room. And then next thing, a doctor came in who didn't look very old, just literally looked like he graduated from uni. But the second he started talking, you just knew exactly what happened, or that he was in control of the situation. So they called in their top professionals to come in, and I was operated on immediately. So there was about a 4-hour operation to save the eye, which thankfully they did. So that began a really long process of recovery, which was basically, I was in the hospital for a week, and I could begin to start seeing light after a week, which was a massive boost. And Mr. Power, who's the surgeon, his team were just, they worked miracles to save the eye. So the next thing then going through my mind was, right, the eye is saved, so when can I get back on the rugby field? So asked that sort of pretty much straight away. And Mr. Power, the surgeon, said, absolutely, do not think about anything like that. You just got to, recover first and foremost. So recovery was being told a year of no activity. I had to wear a patch over my eye for about a month, sleep in certain positions, and apply eye drops every sort of 30 minutes for the next, during the day and the night, for the next month. So that began a long process. But whether it was because I was young, this is when I was 20, whether it was because the surgeons did such unbelievable work, I actually managed to get back playing rugby, so back training 6 months later. So that would have been Joe Schmidt's first year. So in those 6 months, I managed to get back 50% vision. And that's probably where we would have met, because I'd switched clubs from UCD to Mary's. So whenever we would have started playing together, it would have been with about 50% vision. It's sort of, you're just sort of getting going again, juggling trainings between Mary's, and Kieran Potts, who was, that he was a new coach. So juggling a new coach there, juggling a new coach in Joe Schmidt, and was trying to get used to maybe depth perception, and then also gouging incidents, which happened, which was I think it was my third game back. So we played two preseason friendlies against Wasps and Leicester, and then my first game at Mary's was up in De La Salle, Parmesan, and I was gouged in my good eye. So like those sort of things always left a little mark in the back of my mind, but you sort of just brushed it aside and just kept going. And vision gradually improved the whole time. My playing, I believed, was getting a lot better, was learning so much, in particular from Joe. Obviously, it's such a huge impact in Irish rugby, but things were going well. And then it was the day after the 2011 Heineken Cup final. So that miracle match that Johnny, 2 tries in the second half, and fortunate enough I was there. Didn't actually get to play, but there was a group of us that just missed out on selection and all that sort of stuff. But we unfortunately had a game the next day against the Irish under-20s, probably with a few sore heads. But anyway, we played that in Wanderers, and I remember we just scored an early try, and I was kicking for the post, and just my vision was just really blurry. So left the field after about 15 minutes and just went straight to hospital. And it was what was always going to happen, as it was told by my surgeon, that a cataract was going to develop. So that came along, and cataracts, most people think it's a quick sort of 15-minute job, and because of what had gone on previously with the previous operation, it was actually 2 1.5 hour surgeries, which were actually a little bit complicated, and just my vision wasn't, it wasn't getting back to any sort, like it just wasn't as what I remembered. And then it would have been in the pre-season of 2011, and I was with actually both Kieran and Reese Ruddock, Stu Maguire. We were just hanging around in Galway, and it was just in the car, and it was actually a nightmare weekend because all of us got sick in some way. Like, it was the weirdest weekend ever, but just something bad happened to all of us. And I was just in the car and just looked up at the traffic lights, and I just couldn't distinguish the colors. So I knew something was really up. And Mr. Power, the surgeon, said, if you ever get a sudden loss of sight, you've got to come in straight away. So went to the hospital again in the Eye and Ear in Dublin, and there was told, my retina is detached, which is worst case scenario. And then had my fourth and final one, to try and get that tear fixed. But the surgeon, a different surgeon this time, said, unfortunately, the tear is too big. So we cannot save that eye. Your vision is unfortunately completely gone. So I'll never forget that day when the surgeon came in, and my family was actually around me just visiting, and we all burst into tears, and sort of went away from that. It was literally, your vision is gone. You can pack your bags and go home. So that's literally what I did. And sort of just sitting there in your room, and you're just sort of thinking, well, what do you do? So I had a good old think for a few weeks. Just went to London just to, I know it's not exactly very exotic, but just to go somewhere different, just to try get a bit of headspace. I spoke to my dad at length as to what would be the best course of action, and he just said, weigh out the positives and negatives for continuing playing. And I did that, and reluctantly, the negatives really did outweigh the positives. I thought going forward, and the three things that always came back to me were that my eye was still really sore from the operations. Trying to contemplate playing professional rugby with one eye, particularly out half, would be tricky. And the gouging incidents, the third one, the gouging incidents, sort of left me, well, if it actually happened twice during that year, twice with Mary's, if that happens twice in 1 year, what's going to happen? So made the tough decision at 21 to retire. So it was a little bit of a roller coaster in that 18-month period.
Without a doubt, I suppose, and that's what I was saying at the start there, is that you have this dream of things going a certain way, and everybody has a kind of a hope that their life will work out in a way that they dream for, right? Then all of a sudden this changed. How did you manage? So let's go to the decision of having to retire. What was it like having that conversation?
Yeah, I remember going into Joe Schmidt's office, and it was just sort of surreal. And I remember speaking with Peter Breen, who would have dealt with the communication side of things at Leinster Rugby, and he prepared a statement saying, Ian McKinley, age 21, was retired. And I don't think you can be prepared. I think I just sort of went through the motions, and it didn't really hit me at all, if I'm to be totally honest. So I think I just kept thinking, if I work hard at something and keep my mind not on this topic, then I'll be fine. And I suppose I'll get to that a little bit later on. But I just sort of closed up, and would have had nights out on the tear, and
you dealt with it in a way that most people
well,
or read
Yeah, I remember.
informations?
Yeah. I remember one night even I was in a nightclub in Dublin, and actually some Mary's lads came in,
Was
and
I there? Was I?
there was I won't name who was there, but there was a few, and I
Probably better
remember
off.
I remember one of the lads just gave me a hug, didn't say anything to me, gave me a hug, and I just burst into tears. And
I was there. Yeah.
and so things like that just built up of emotion, and then a build up of emotion, and you're just comes out in certain ways. So I suppose to answer, I didn't really process it at all.
Yeah, I suppose it's quite interesting, because I think the lad who gave you that hug had been with you from underage as well, and had kind of been had been
Mm-hmm.
involved in your kind of rugby story from an
Mm-hmm.
early innings as well, which is, I think
Mm-hmm.
it shows that how much others cared about you and about like the challenges that you were going through. Nobody was sweeping it under the rug. A lot of people were very concerned for you at the time. Um, and I suppose the fact of the matter is, seeing you as well in person after the whole thing is it's going to bring a flood of emotions, because everybody was so upset for you at the time. I suppose let's also, like, I actually, I didn't mention this before, but in looking at the journey in your life today and everything, while you while you finished up with rugby in Ireland, rugby actually didn't end for you. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I think this is going to be interesting for people, especially who don't know anything about you and who may not have heard about your story. I think it'd be interesting to kind of nearly explain what happened next. So, what
Mm-hmm.
opportunities kind of present themselves from the time you retired.
Yeah, so I mean, my upbringing has been, centered around sport, and my family loves sport. But rugby does, is the pinnacle of the sporting world for us. And in no way did I actually, even though I didn't process the decision, in no way did I fall out of love with the game. So immediately, whenever I announced I was retiring, I just took up coaching. I went back to Gaelic football, but the coaching I absolutely loved. And Leinster were extremely good to me. They kept me involved. Anytime I wanted to watch the academy, I remember I took an under 17s team with John Fogarty, things like that, just to keep you. And even UCD and Mary's, took the under 20 pennants. Um, sometimes would have helped out UCD just with, even a small little thing like a warm up. So the love for rugby was never gone, but I was just trying to think in what capacity can you do it. So it was coaching. So luckily with working with Leinster, and that's the great thing about Ireland, and in particular the rugby world, is that it's so small, and that everyone seems to know everyone. So there actually became a contact in Italy, in the northeastern part of Italy, who knew Mick Carney, who was my Irish under 20s manager in Lansdowne, and they said, would there be anyone young willing to, take a stab in the dark, as it were, to coach this new club that's up and coming. And so I got a phone call from my academy manager, or ex-academy manager, just to say, we like the opportunity. I remember I was in Dundrum Shopping Centre with a couple of bags in my hands, and just said, yeah, I'll do it. I need to get out of Ireland. I need to have a change of scenery. So went over twice just to check out the club, see if everything was all in order. Was really happy, and started my coaching career age 22 with this newly founded rugby club in the northeast of Italy.
And how, like, what was that like? Because you went over to a country, I presume you didn't understand the language.
No. I mean, you learn after a while this sort of, action with the with the hand can mean anything. But yeah, there's the funny stories. Like when I went over with my wife. Now she went into the shop and asked for stock cubes, but looking at the dictionary, instead of asking for stock cubes, she asked, "Where's the livestock?" Like silly things like that. That you know you just sort of have to throw yourself into situations that you're never going to forget the word for a stock cube again.
And what is it?
But yeah, so I actually don't know. She'll know. She predominantly did the shopping. But No, so you have to learn pretty quickly, because I was thrown into teaching 50 kids from school, a combination of English and rugby at the same time. So you had to learn pretty quickly. You had to learn the language pretty quickly. So I mean, I loved it, everything about it. Got to meet new people, got to see how Italy does things in a rugby sense, and even just in a general sporting sense, which is totally different to how it works in Ireland. And the 3 hour siesta in the afternoon, just having a brioche and a coffee for breakfast instead of a fry, weather, all these different things, and just living away from your family for the first time, all those sort of things. But it was perfect. Like, I was really, really, really happy. But there was always like talking to you about those built up moments. So the one that I had, crying in the arms of one of the guys in Mary's, which I haven't spoken about a lot. But then I had my other moment in 2013. So that would have been, it would have been a year and a half, I suppose, after I'd retired, and my brother visited me, and it was the day after Leinster had played Northampton in the Challenge Cup, and they actually demolished them, and all these guys that I'd played with, from underage, my underage career. And, I wasn't jealous of them at all, but I was just so annoyed that I wasn't there helping contribute to this win, or just not. I suppose maybe there are some selfish reasons, getting plaudits and all that, and all these things. And I just burst out into tears out of nowhere, like just out of nothing. I wasn't even expecting anything. And we were just walking along, and my brother reminds me, the words I used were, I can't do it. I can't do it anymore. So that gave him a green light to say, we need an intervention here. Ian is really struggling with the fact that he's made this decision, and what can we do for him? So he is really important in this whole story. So he would have gone back and thought, well, my brother, he can still kick a ball 50 meters. He can still pass accurately 20 meters off hands. How can we give him this sort of satisfaction that his eyes are going to be protected? And so anyway, we got, again, the great thing about Ireland, it's so small. We were thinking, how are we going to get experts? Are we going to have to go to Japan? Are we going to have to go to America for all this sort of stuff? And lo and behold, the head of World Rugby offices are in Stevens Green. So we spoke to them about a potential project for eyewear or eye goggles. They were in the very early stages of developing a type. We, in the meantime, had spoken with a design student in NCAD in Dublin, so the National College of Art and Design, who just dropped his end of year project with 8 weeks to go, and thought, yeah, sure, I'll give a bash of trying to design eyewear. And we basically, through meeting all these different people and then meeting the actual manufacturing company, who are called Raleri. Again, we were thinking, God, we're going to have to go to China and source these, one of these more exotic places. But all it ended up just being in Italy, and only 4 hours away from where I was living. Oh. So basically, we accelerated all the meetings, and ended up that rugby goggles became available in January 2014. So I picked up the very first pair of goggles that were available and started playing with the club that I was coaching. So it was the Serie C level, which is the lowest of the low in Italian, and it was just, I suppose, a huge sense of relief that I was able to get back to the rugby field.
There you go, part one of my conversation with Ian McKinley. What a fascinating story so far. So don't miss out on part two of the conversation, and for all future episodes, subscribe to What Makes You Tick to stay up to date.